but I will desperately need at some point about the coverage of Afghanistan. But please, your thoughts?
Oh gosh, there's a lot going on. The idea that the Taliban was not going to take over Kabul at some point is a fantasy. So what happened was the timetable. What the Biden administration got wrong was the intelligence on the timetable,
right.
How quickly this was all going to happen. Biden explained when he was running for president, he was very clear. It is not in our national interest to be in Afghanistan. Is there a moral argument to be made? Yes. But as he described, the U.S. Army is not used for moral obligations. As he said, are we going to invade China because how they're treating certain minorities? That's not what the American military is for. We invaded, as Blinken was saying, to bring to justice the people who attacked us on 9/11. He saw Afghanistan as a military lost cause, and he did not want to be there anymore. 70% of Americans, including 56% of Republicans, supported his idea of withdrawing the troops. So all of this was inevitable. When the troops left, the odds are the Taliban was going to take over. But the press is just enthralled by the optics. They're convinced this is going to stain his legacy. It might ruin his entire presidency. And of course, they're just they're piggybacking on Republican talking points.
Thank you. Yes,
yeah, I mean,
and Warhawks. I'm glad. I was just going to read at least this one. I don't know which story this is, but thank God some people have not completely lost their memory. A U.S.-led invasion dislodged the Taliban and beat them back, though America lost focus on the conflict and the chaos of the Iraq War. Donald Trump signed a deal with the Taliban in February 2020 that limited direct military action against the insurgents. That allowed the fighters to gather strength and move quickly to seize key areas when Biden announced his plans. I mean, he absolutely tied Biden's hands. And Trump's the one that made this peace deal that now has been memory hold from the RNC website. This historic peace deal that Donald Trump, he didn't negotiate with the Afghan government, only with the terrorists. Right? I mean,
it's literally being scrubbed from their website. Look, so Trump made this deal last year, and I think that a lot of the press coverage was, well, we're not going to take this seriously. He's not really a serious person. Like, who invites the Taliban to Camp David on 9/11? It was all kind of like, this is just a weird Trump thing he's doing on his way out the door. It's not really important. It doesn't really matter.
It was for his reelection, like everything else. It's just to look like he got a peace deal, right?
Yeah. And so he wanted to get all the troops out in May.
Yes.
Biden came in and said, no, we're not going to do it by May. But that peace deal had completely, as was explained, completely emboldened the Taliban. They knew they had this timetable. They knew they could, rally their forces. Biden could have basically ignored that and kept the troops there, but has been explained, is completely omitted from all the context. The Taliban made clear if the United States ignored that peace agreement, which our president signed last year, that they were going to escalate violence. They were going to escalate violence against our troops, population centers, civilians. It was going to get very, very bad. And Biden looked at it and said, it's not worth having 2,500 American troops there. It's so inevitable that they were going to be withdrawn. And all these Republican critics who ran in front of TV and these breathless journalists were typing it up. What was the Republican policy? The Republican policy is to keep troops there forever.
Right.
And we have spent $2 trillion in Afghanistan. So no one was asking Republicans yesterday, okay, if you don't like the Biden plan, what's your plan? It was just, tell us everything Biden did wrong. Tell us everything Biden did wrong. And of course, the images aren't good. And of
they
course,
cheered
the
it.
Got it wrong.
They're so hypocritical, as you know, Eric, that of course they cheered it when it was Trump's idea. And then it's like, oh, well, Biden didn't do. I mean, tell me what Biden said that's wrong. He said he inherited this plan from his predecessor. He said 1 year or 5 years more of U.S. military presence would not have made a difference if the Afghan military cannot or will not hold its own country. And an endless American presence in the middle of another country's civil conflict was not acceptable to me. When I came to office, I inherited a deal deal cut by my predecessor, which he invited the Taliban to discuss at Camp David on the eve of 9/11 in 2019, that left the Taliban in the strongest position militarily since 2001 and imposed a May 1st deadline on U.S. forces. Shortly before he left office, he also drew U.S. forces down to a bare minimum of 2,500. Biden faced a choice as his presidency began to either follow through on the deal or ramp up our presence and send more American troops to fight once again in another country's civil conflict. I was the fourth president, he said, to preside over an American troop presence in Afghanistan. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I would not and will not pass this war on to a fifth. He made the right call. I mean, it is just, I guess we should not be surprised at the unbelievable hypocrisy of Republicans on this.
No, and we should not be surprised that the press is just going to run right in and you know, as we have said 100 times, every news cycle is driven by what are Republicans angry about. And the press, let's face it, has been very anxious for many months to portray Biden as swallowed up in crisis. You know, it was the border in the spring that was going to derail his entire presidency. And so there's, particularly during the dog days of summer, I think there's a real effort to gin up this hysteria. And as I pointed out in my piece, anyone who thinks that the public polling is going to swing on this is living in a fantasy. Anyone thinks there's going to be a U-turn and Americans are suddenly going to want U.S. forces once again fighting in the mountains. This is not moving the needle. It's not registering because the Americans have basically ceded this defeat 10 years ago, let alone 6 months ago. But boy, the hysterical press coverage. And you know, there's so little of the historical context we've talked about. I mean, some segments and some articles, you would think this war started in January. I mean, I have seen columns. I have seen
Biden's war, right?
I have seen columns where Biden is the only president mentioned in connection to the Afghanistan war. Yeah. But hey, you know, he's a big boy, and I think he's willing to take this, and I think he thinks, you know, it's in America's interest in the long run. Obviously, they didn't want these photos of the airport. Obviously, they wish they got the interpreters out. Obviously, they, you know, didn't think Taliban was going to be there in 3 days.
Right.
And that was a mistake, and mistakes happen. But the idea, you know, oh, this is Saigon. This is, you know, this is just like the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon could have ended the Vietnam War in 1969. He deliberately extended that for 5 years. Biden is not doing that.